Hey, what's up everybody? Michael from RogueDeckBuilder.com here doing a Deck Tech Doctor episode. This deck is brought to us by Not a Golfer on Reddit. He sent me his deck, and this is a Simic Evolve deck. I absolutely love Evolve as a mechanic. Very fun mechanic to play with. Can't see it's incredibly viable right now, but it's still extremely fun to play, and going unchecked, it can definitely take over a board. So the main thing he was concerned about was sideboard. Like he has a very good start, like a very solid base to his main board. I just have a few suggestions. His description says he's tested it a bit and seems to have a slight disadvantage against aggro, and of course very susceptible to board wipes. But I mean, not much you can do about that in these creature-based decks. It's just a matter of trying to kill them before they can do much, or at least being able to put out more threats than they have removal. I mean, they only have 4 Supreme Verdicts, so they're going to have to resort to other things like Detention Spheres and things like that if they actually want to take out your 29 creatures. Oh, excuse me. So he wants to use Evolve to pretty much unleash a huge attack with Colonian Hydra. I am going to recommend not putting Colonian Hydra into the deck. I personally would make room for other cards. And there's a little bit of there's a couple of cards that I don't know if I agree with too much. Like, for example, Voral of the Hulklade and Kior's Follower, as well as Master Biomancer. You can probably keep him because at least he's a 2/4 body. But even like Cloudfin Raptor, it might even be better just to go Elvish Mystic and be able to ramp into a little bit more, because you do have quite a high curve in this deck, and getting all that stuff out earlier is much better for you, and being able to play your Prime Speaker Zagana and stuff like that earlier, and just draw a whole bunch of cards, just keep drawing through your deck. If you build it right. Oh, excuse me. I saw one of these decks in Star City Games Open tournament, and he ended up drawing more cards than the blue-white control player, which is quite a feat. I might knock it up to 24 lands because of the curve. Oh, excuse me. Depends on how it goes out. I mean, you are playing 4 Sylvan Caryatid, and I personally would rather run for Elvish Mystic over Cloudfin Raptor. But that's just me. I prefer to just have a really aggressive ramp and put out larger threats before them. But having something in the air to attack every turn is still pretty nice. But the one thing I don't like about Cloudfin Raptor is because you're not playing a super aggressive creature strategy, like Mono Blue Devotion or something like that. Cloudfin Raptor is really the only creature that plays well in that deck, in my opinion. Just because you gotta have consistent curve to keep evolving it. And this deck is a little bit mix and matched, as well as just being able to ramp into other things. I think fits the deck a little bit more, especially if you want to keep Colonian Hydra in the deck. It's a 5 costing creature, and that's still pretty high up on the curve. Urban Evolution is not a bad card. I think leaving 1 in is perfectly fine. You might even experiment if you add in the Elvish Mystics to play 2 of. Being able to draw through your deck, as well as ramping through lands. This, along with Kiora, just you get to higher costing cards much faster. Plasm Capture, I'm not 100% sure if I agree with Plasm Capture in the main board. It may be a nice one of in the sideboard, possibly just for the control matchup. But I think for 4 mana, just you're playing a deck that wants to get all their permanents out and just be very aggressive with the creatures. I don't think leaving up mana is something that you would want to afford to do for 4 mana. If you're worried about things to counter, I would include maybe like Dissolve or a couple of negates, or those types of counters, cheaper counters essentially for this deck in the sideboard, or possibly in the main board if you absolutely need to. But I think there's better cards that you could be running. For example, Cyclonic Rift, I would probably replace Plasm Capture with. Cyclonic Rift hasn't been seeing much play, but I personally think it's an extremely good card in Standard right now. When there's so many things to be able to bounce, and Planeswalkers or Detention Spheres or anything like that, it's a very good tempo card, and it allows you to really be able to buy you time to get out the cards you need to hopefully build up a nice board state to swing through. And the overload is extremely it usually wins you the game if you can overload it. And because you're running a lot of ramp through cards like Kiora and Kiora's Follower and Sylvan Caryatid, it shouldn't really be too hard to be able to overload that 2 or 3 turns earlier than you normally would and set your opponent extremely far back, depending on the type of deck they're playing. So even as a sideboard option, you might consider Cyclonic Rift. 3 Simic Charm, I think, perfectly fine. Making your creatures larger is awesome. Hexproof is awesome, especially with so much removal in Standard right now. And being able to act as a disperse for creatures is pretty sweet indeed. So I'll just go over some of the suggestions I would probably do if I was building this. I would definitely add in Garruk, Caller of Beasts, as a 2 or 3 of possibly. You're playing 29 creatures, which is a very creature dense deck. So just being able to keep drawing through creatures, as well as just sometimes getting a free casting of that with his -3 is extremely important when you're trying to. It works very well, especially when you're trying to evolve creatures and being able to get an extra cast off with his -3 and get an extra evolve or something like that, or get a creature out that you normally can't pay for is extremely nice. I would also consider possibly playing Bread for the Hunt, maybe even in the sideboard. In the control matchup when it's going to be a longer game, and it allows you to draw through your deck, and it definitely can start drawing you a ton of cards if it goes unchecked. I went over Cyclonic Rift. So sideboarding wise, you mentioned you had problems with the sideboard, so I'll probably here's where most of my suggestions will go. So you need some way to get rid of enchantments and artifacts and stuff like that. Cyclonic Rift doesn't get rid of them, essentially just puts them back in their hand. So being able to unravel the Aether, something like Detention Sphere or any gods, that's pretty much your only answer to gods and things like that. So unravel the Aether is pretty much a must-have in a sideboard for this type of deck. Scavenging Ooze is good because Black Golgari Dredge is actually being played quite a bit more, and having a Graveyard Hate in your deck is a little bit more of a meta call. But if you need some sort of Graveyard Hate, you have a lot of mana to be able to access his ability to use it over and over, and he grows extremely large. Plus, it goes along with your theme with counters and everything like that. It doesn't have evolve, but it still involves counters, so that's always nice. Plus, the life gain is very nice, even including it in like a burn matchup to be able to have a threat on board that gets bigger. Plus, being able to keep your life total a little bit higher for those burn matchups. Mysticator Hydra for the control matchup, or any mono blue-white devotion matchup, of course. 4 of in your sideboard is sort of a staple for any green-based deck as of now. Arbor Colossus is actually pretty decent because it combats cards like Stormbreath Dragon. It totally stops them in their track, and because you have the ramp, you get it out. You essentially are going to be able to get it out sooner than they get out Stormbreath Dragon. So if you feel they're going to play Stormbreath Dragon next or something like that, you can always just hold it back or anything like that. But having a 6/6 for 5 is just already good as it is, and being able to have it have reach as well as destroy other flying creatures is awesome indeed as well. And it's still just a great card to have against a lot of the mid-range decks now, especially when they're playing cards like Obzidot and things like that. Like Arbor Colossus is just such a big body for such a low cost, especially when you have ramp. So I think it's a great sideboard card, if not a main board card right now. Mutant's Prey is a sideboard card because you have Evolve and you're going to have a lot of creatures with 1/1 counters on them. It's a nice quick way in the creature matchups like Green Red Monsters or something to get rid of their early cards or anything like that. And being able to do it at instant speed just for 1 mana allows you to use your mana a lot more efficiently and get rid of one of their creatures because your creatures are generally going to be quite large as it is with the Evolve and everything like that. You mentioned you had a problem with aggro. Aetherize is a pretty decent answer to that in the sideboard. It is 4 mana, but again, since you have the ramp and everything like that, you can essentially play it on turn 3 and bounce back whatever creatures they just played out, because they're generally going to be swinging a lot they're just generally just going to be swinging out more often than not in the early turn. So being able to Aetherize it sets them back a ton until you can at least build up your board state in the next couple of turns. But I mean, a lot of your cards are naturally going to be larger. Even Sylvan Caryatid roadblocks a lot of the haste creatures and the aggro creatures. So I mean, Aetherize might be a testing card, but just a possible way to buy you more time. You mentioned also Wrath is a problem. You can't really combat against that. It's just a matter of not overextending too much when you don't need to, and being prepared for possible Supreme Verdicts, and really just knowing the matchup in general. But Mending Touch might be a nice sideboard option to keep those must-have threats on board, like if you have your Colonia Tusker, or a really large Prime Speaker Zagana, or something like that, or Renegade Crisis, and just being able to keep those on board against Supreme Verdicts or anything like that, and just having a threat that stays there can be extremely important. And even in the creature matchups, you might consider using it to win trades or things like that. So now I also would recommend possibly adding in Nykthos to your land base. The reason is it just adds, you have quite a few cards with double green. And being able to just have an extra way to ramp into those cards, you can have such explosive ways to get your board state going, and hitting Prime Speaker Zagana. I would actually add in another Prime Speaker Zagana as a 2-of. I know it's legendary, but at the same time it generally doesn't usually live long for this world, and having an extra copy is nice, and you do want to increase your chances of drawing it a little bit. Even if it is 6 mana, again, since you have the ramp and everything like that to work with it, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I also would consider adding in Sylvan Primordial, possibly in the creature base, even replacing some of your other creatures like Vorel, like 2 Sylvan Primordial instead of this. It does raise your curve, but again, you have ramp, and it's just such an underrated green card, being able to kill off planeswalkers or detention spheres or things like that, while just being a huge 6/8 body with reach that blocks everything in standard right now. So that is something to consider. But you have a really great start. I mean, you mentioned that sideboarding wise is your biggest problem, so hopefully that my suggestions helped you at least give you an idea of what to do for your sideboard. If you want more suggestions for your sideboard, actually, I wrote an article, a 3-part guide on sideboarding and just general things to think about and how to go through cards and pick which ones you need for your sideboard. I wrote it on roguedeckbuilder.com, so definitely go head over there and check it out. I wrote it quite recently, so you could just go back in the past older posts, and it should be there. But yeah, that's my suggestions. Take them or leave them, do what you want, and as usual, for the rest of you guys watching, if you guys have any suggestions for Not a Golfer's Simic Evolved deck, then please leave them in the comments below, and I'm sure he'll get to them once he watches this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.